The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
This is Danny Bobrow, President of AIM Dental Marketing, welcoming you to this installment of the Practice Perfection web-based education series. Today's presentation is entitled, Discover the Operational Equity in Your Practice, the Dental Performance Institute. A dental practice operations and financial analyst by trade, Diana's clients and key opinion leaders praise her most for being innovative, honest, direct, and professional. Her approach incorporates a 360-degree assessment of business operations and financials, as well as the leader and team, to help the organization to truly see what is holding them back from generating revenue, improving efficiency, and advancing their practice growth goals. Diana specializes in organizing, standardizing, and improving practice operations, patient referral-based retention, financial growth, increasing brand awareness, new business development, team building and communication, internal and external conflict management, acquisition to transition, the startup practice, credentialing, and compliance. I would say in short, there's little that Diana doesn't do. As part of her process, she helps clients create and implement the training and team building programs required to ensure that cultural and other changes needed for growth occur and are sustainable well into the future. Diana sees through the white noise to help practices realize their full potential in a timely manner. Now, before we get to today's event and very special presenter, I want to remind you that Practice Perfection webcasts run for around 90 minutes. While attendees are in listen-only mode, we invite you at any time to submit your questions or comments using the question button on your screen. We will allow time following the presentation to get your questions answered. If we should not get to your question during the webcast, we'll see that they're answered shortly thereafter. As always, attendance at this presentation entitles you to receive 1.5 hours of continuing education credit. Shortly following the webcast, you will be emailed a brief survey and instructions on how to receive your CE. Participants are cautioned about the dangers of incorporating techniques and procedures into their practices if the course has not provided them with adequate clinical experience to allow them to perform it competently. And with that, it is my pleasure to welcome Ms. Diana Thompson to the Practice Perfection stage. Hello, Diana.
Hi, Danny. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. So are we ready to get started?
You may fire when ready.
Okay, great. Well, first, I'd like to welcome everybody that is on this webinar from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. I'm really excited to present this topic to you because it's a true passion of mine. So operational equity, as we go through this presentation, you're going to get a true meaning and case study of what this really means. So as we move forward, the presentation focuses, we're going to talk a little bit about who Dental Performance Institute is, get to know me a bit, what is operational equity, we're going to discuss the operational equity modules, and then we're going to do some Q&A as Dan mentioned earlier. So who is Dental Performance Institute? Dental Performance Institute has been in business for 6.5 years. And what we focus on is we help dental practices either increase their profitability, repair their profitability and their team dynamics, customer service, and or scale their businesses. So what helped me to create this business was I've been in the industry since I was 16. Which is a little over 30 years. And I started out as an after-school employee, just doing whatever the practice needed me to do, and I liked what I saw. So after I graduated high school, I had a decision to make. I either go to college because I had a partial volleyball scholarship, or I start working. And where I was in my life, college was not in the cards for me, so I started working. My first practice was a dental assistant in a perio practice on the East Coast. I'm originally from Chicago, but my family had a job change, so I was on the East Coast in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania for about 5 years, and then I moved back. However, working with this periodontist really opened my eyes to the clinical part of dentistry. Fast forward a bit, unfortunately, he retired and I moved back to Chicago, and I really didn't know where in the dental industry I was going to go. So I signed up with a few temp agencies, and they placed me in GP practices, specialty practices, ortho, endo, periodontal. They placed me in oral surgery. And after being out in the temp world for about 2.5 years, I decided to hire on with a GP in Glen Ellen, Illinois, and I was with him for about 2.5 years. But while I was with him, what I was doing was I was presenting treatment plans and closing treatment plans, and I was doing very well. And in this day and age, I was selling treatment plans. And that's when I realized where my sales experience came in. And from that, I moved on to a couple other dental practices, but then I also moved on to working with corporate in the dental world, but I still supplemented my income on the side doing dental assisting. So I worked with Bisco Dental Products, which is out of Schaumburg, Illinois. I worked with an IT firm, which really wasn't dental related. And then I also worked with a multiple location, at this time what you would call an emerging DSO. It was a company that had 21 dental practices in Chicago. So my last position was with the emerging DSO, and I was practice coordinator that managed 13 dental practices. And the one common denominator that I always found was there was always money sitting on the table, but I focused on it, but I really didn't focus on it. So after I moved on from that company, I became a consultant for Mercer Global Advisors. And Mercer was out of first Vancouver, and then they moved to Scottsdale, Arizona. I was with them for 5 years, from 2003 to 2008. They were acquired, and it was my calling to move on from the business, do some independent consulting. My mom became ill, and I took care of her for a few years, and she moved on from life. But when she was still here, she said to me, she said, "Diana, you need to start your own business." My mom used to work on Dun & Bradstreet back in the day, and she was a business person. I said, "Mom, this happened in September 2011. And I was like, "Mom, are you kidding? Do you know what the economy is like?" And she's like, "No, you should need to start your own business." Fast forward, Dental Performance Institute was put into play on January 23rd, 2012. So that's a little about dental performance. That's a little bit about Diana. So where did operational equity come into play? So while I was with Mercer, I was a road warrior. I was working with all types of dental practices, you name it, single location, group practices, specialty businesses, oral surgery practices. And every time I would do an analysis, again, money was laying on the table, but now the light bulb went on. And I said, there's some opportunity here. So when I started the business 3 years into it, I started to look at this, and I figured out that dentists, what dentists really want, and this is the feedback I received from dentists, is at this point they wanted to scale or they wanted to be profitable. So if they have to scale, they have to be profitable. But when they scale, and depending how fast these offices scaled, it came to the point that they needed money to scale. So when I go into practices and I look at how much money is laying on the table, I said, that's operational equity. And I actually, 2 years ago, I registered the trademark and it was approved. So I'm really excited about that. So as we move forward, we're going to discuss operational equity, and I'm going to give you a case study of a dentist in Arlington Heights, Illinois, that we worked with for 2.5 years, rebuilt his business to a point where he partnered with a DSO company out of Chicago. So what is operational equity? Operational equity is money that's already been produced, which is your collections, and productivity that's waiting to be produced, which is your production. And these are dollars that are sitting in your operational models of your practice, and it doesn't matter what type of practice you have, whether it's GP, specialty, prosto, oral surgery, emerging DSO organizations, it doesn't matter. There's money that's sitting there. And so that money is waiting to be placed back into your revenue stream, then deposited into your bank account. Now, one of the things that I noticed with operational equity is the questions that I get is, well, Diana, how do you know this money's sitting there? First, it's from experience. Second, it's from after analyzing the business itself, the dental practice business itself, I can see if there's obviously turnover with team members. I can see if there's a lack of follow-up being done. I can see if there's a lack of skill with the practice management system in the office. And usually when there's turnover, then there's really a lack of follow-up because people are just trying to stay ahead of the curve because they're in reactive mode instead of proactive mode. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward. So operational equity modules. Again, for GP, specialty, group, emerging DSO, prosthodontics, and normal surgery. The first one is the hygiene department. Now, why would you say the hygiene department? It includes recare and it includes perio patients. And there's always outstanding appointments when it comes to the hygiene department, unscheduled appointments, lack of productivity. The perio coding isn't being coded properly and the billing isn't being placed through electronic at the levels that it needs to be. So there's still money laying on the table and the follow-up is lacking. The second is outstanding case inventory. And these are the treatment plans that have been presented to patients, but for some reason, they're just not making it into the schedule. Either the patient wants to wait, they don't believe that there's a value behind it, they don't realize the urgency with it, and they don't realize what the risk is of the treatment that's being presented to them. And it could also be because of a previous experience, that they don't believe that that treatment is actually something that they're going to need. But the way I look at it is that they're going to get the treatment done in your office or somewhere else. Then outstanding dental insurances. And these are claims they're just not paid yet. And why is that? That could be anything from documentation was sent, but the insurance company didn't receive it. They're not paying the claim properly. We're not following up with the claims in a timely manner, so they hit their expiration date where you can't get your money back. There's a couple areas with that. And the last one is accounts receivable. So, and the reason I put accounts receivable is the fourth one. There is one more, but that's for specialty practices. But with accounts receivable, it's money that's already been generated. It's just not collected yet. So really, you have to fix the outstanding dental insurance claims prior to going after the accounts receivable. Now, you could do it the other way as a choice. Yes.
Would you maybe add as a subhead under outstanding dental insurance claims, not only not paid, but rejected? And maybe that there's an opportunity to submit properly, just understanding how to do that with the right substantiation, a statement of medical necessity or whatever as part of that.
Absolutely, and especially with piggybacking on your comment there, you have the EOBs that are paid with a check or electronic funds transfer, but the ones you're speaking about are the ones that are just sitting there, they're rejected because of lack of information, or the insurance company just wants to reject it because they don't think that, for example, in a perio situation, that there's enough bone loss to do any type of scaling or root planing, so you have to prove yourself. But yes, those would be two different categories, absolutely.
Right.
And then we also talked about accounts receivable. And the fifth one is if it's a specialty practice, perio, endo, prosto, pedo, oral surgery. And that's really focused on the referral base. If it's actually growing, if it's not growing, what's the management of it, and how are you marketing to it? So the first equity module, what we look at within a general perio, prosto, and pedo practices is we look at the active patient base. Now, active patient base, there's two categories with that. You have your active patient base that all the charts in the system are active, and then you have your active patient base that the active patients are revolving through the hygiene program, and you're retaining those patients. And we usually look at that within a 2-year time frame. So when we're looking at active patients, we're looking at unscheduled patients. Then we're also looking at an additional patient base because in the practice management software systems, you can take a look to see patients that don't have a due date in recare or perio maintenance, or they've just never been in, but they're in your computer system. It's more labor intensive to reactivate those patients, but if you're in a situation of a transition, acquisition to transition, this is an area we would focus on. We also look at productivity and perio coding. And when I mean productivity, what I mean is the hygienist, what is the level of percentage they're producing for the practice, and also the level of percentage that they are producing when it comes to their compensation, which is hourly or salary, because your hygienist should be producing at least 30 to 33% of their hourly or salary rate. So let's take a look at the recare or hygiene department as a whole and how we analyze this. So as I said, we look at the active patient base. Now, before I get started with this, I would like to talk a little bit about the practice and the case study that we're looking at. So I'm going to go back a slide. So with this, the client that we had, Arlington Heights, we worked with him for 2.5 years. He was in a position where he has a very large practice. He has 8 operatories. He had 4 doctors in the practice. His wife was a hygienist. He had 5 full-time and 3 part-time hygienists. They were all on commission. And within a 1.5-year time frame, the dentist moved on from the practice for whatever reason, health reason, moved out of state, what have you. So the practice downsized very quickly, as did the profitability. Some of the hygienists left. So we were invited into the practice by his marketing firm to get an idea of how we could get him back on track. So with this practice, when I came into the practice, I spoke with him and his wife, and it took us 2.5 years to get him back on track. We did the analysis, we did the observation of the practice. I put together his action plan. And what was so great about this practice is when we implemented that action plan within the 2.5 years, this team grabbed onto it and ran with it. And that's the reason why this practice is profitable and was able to partner with another DSO. And we'll talk about that as we get to the end of the presentation. So when I went into this practice and I analyzed it, I looked at their active patient base that's revolving through hygiene. And they had 28,098 patients. So for a practice of his size, he had enough patients that he could work with and take care of as an existing patient base, but also there was room there for 2 other associates. So in the interim, we worked on getting him 2 other associates. And once we put those people into place, then that helped to obviously increase the productivity. So when we looked at that, part of that active patient base is 3 categories below it. So as you see, you have current patients. And current patients are patients that are appointed ahead in the hygiene schedule, and patients that their due date is current, but for some reason, they're not appointed ahead in the hygiene schedule. So you have retained patients and patients that aren't retained, but they're still current. So from those current patients, that was 2,119. Out of the 2898, the appointed ahead of 1231 was 42%, when the goal of industry standard is 90. Then the due date current was 888, which is 31% of the active patient base, which the goal is less than 10. So there was some reactivation that we had to do there. Then we go into the 3rd category of the active patient base, which is overdue patients. So in the practice management software, you can go in to see how many of those overdue patients are scheduled or unscheduled. So overdue patients were 791 of that 2898, which was 27% of their patient base, which it should be less than 10. So again, these patients that are within these 3 categories that add up to that 2898 are patients within a 2-year time frame, a year ahead and a year back, that can be reactivated and jumpstart the revenue activity for this practice. Then what I do is break it down further. Now, one of the things that I want to say is our team, out of everybody on our team, I'm the only one that analyzes practices, because it takes certain competencies and certain skill level to do this, and it's very hard to train. So I'm the one that goes in, I'll do the analysis, I'll do the action plan, and put together the customized implementation plan for the practice, and then hand that down to our team. Or I still do hands-on implementation because I don't want to take my hands off the pulse of what's going on in our industry. So now that I have the active patient base, now I want to see what revenue is outstanding and what is the possibility of dollars to get back into this practice. So when I break down a patient base, as you see in the top left corner, I break it down by the percentage of adult, and I break it down by the percentage of child. And there's a reason I do that. So the reason that I do that is because there's certain services under a child appointment when it comes to hygiene, and there's certain services under an adult. And once you add those together per practice, because it's different per practice and the fees are different per practice, this is actually how I can create their operational equity. So the untapped revenue of 540 overdue adult patients, which is 72% of that active patient number, was $70,000, a little over $70,000. Now you're saying, well, how did you get that, Diana? Well, if you look at that middle column where it says adult patient revenue, what I did is I went in and I took the fees out of their productivity report of what they've billed, and I've done an average for each one of those categories that added up to $180. And then I did the math. Now, in this practice, they did very little perio services. However, that was an opportunity. I placed it in there anyway, and we'll talk about that on the next page. So then I looked at the child patient revenue. Same thing. Services that added up to $175. So the untapped revenue on the 28% of the overdue child patients were $26,600. Then I went and I did the due date current not appointed of the equity that was outstanding. Again, these are current patients. These do not include new patients. The untapped revenue on the 888, which was 72% of that number, was $115,000, a little over. And then the untapped revenue for the current due date not appointed was 43. So if you take a look at the total of those four categories, that added up to $255,395 just in that category. Okay. Then I looked at that separate report of patients that they're either not attached to a due date or they're just sitting out there in the computer space. And in this practice, they had 1,192 adults with untapped potential of $214,000, and their children, 28% untapped potential of $81,000. So that untapped potential was $295,760. So now when you add this up, the untapped revenue equity is $551,155. And the reason I have insurance is 100% is because the majority, not all of them, but the majority of insurances for preventative pay at 100%. It's either 70, 80, 90, or 100, and there's some out there that are 50. So in this case, this practice did not have a recare coordinator. And when a practice of this size at almost 3,000 patients doesn't have a recare coordinator coordinating this department, it's caused to decline. So we looked at their team member and we appointed a full-time recare coordinator to get this office back on track. We also implemented a follow-up recall in the recare coordinator role, and we standardized the process and protocol for this. So that's part of the first operational module. So then what we do is we look at the hygiene department overall and their perio program. So I'm not going to go too much in detail to this, but I am going to go into certain points. So like I said, with this practice, they downsized their hygiene department. So they had 4 hygienists that were working between 73 to 81 hours per week with an average of 77 hours. So the patient practice hours were about 53 a week. Then what we do is we break down their productivity, because again, a hygienist in the hygiene department should be producing at least 30 to 33% of the overall practice production. And in this practice, they were producing about 21%. So then I did the math, and it came up that their operational equity was about, $187,000, a little over. So then I also looked at their perio program. And their perio program, they were doing about 5% perio from their prophy codes to their perio codes. And so the untapped perio program equity is $208,000. So their total untapped equity for this category is $396,000, close to $400,000. Now you're probably sitting there thinking, are they going to get all that money back? And I'm going to tell you, absolutely not. So when we go into a practice and we look at this, we'll give them an idea. Let's say if you get 20% back or 15% back in the practice or 20%, we go very conservatively to give them an idea what they can regenerate back in this practice, whether they're reactivating and or regenerating dollars. So now we look at the second operational equity module, which is the case inventory and treatment coordination process. Did they have case coordinators? Who is making the financial discussion and extending that to patients? We look at the documentation of agreement between the patient and the practice. We look at their follow-up systems, and we look to see if they have metrics in place, what type of metrics, and how strong they are. So in this practice, we generated an unscheduled treatment plan report. And after generating that report for 12 months, it concluded that there was close to $500,000, $492,889 of planned and diagnosed treatment that was just sitting in the practice's inventory. That's about $41,000 a month. So if they were to get 50% of this back into the practice, they would have additional revenue of $246,000 and then some. And again, insurance percentages, they vary. So
Diana, in your experience,
yes.
Would you say that 50% is a realistic and in fact what you see your clients realize with your assistance?
Absolutely. We've had clients that have done 30%. We've had clients that done 40%, and it could depend why they did that. I had clients that did 72% back in the practice, and it's because the way that we customized their program. What's interesting about this, and I'm glad you asked that question, is that the treatment coordination process is an art within itself. Because when you're working with patients, first you're working with personalities, you're working with their hot buttons, is it money time or something else? You're working with fear, and you're working with a patient or a person that is making an emotional purchase. So if the treatment coordinator or the financial coordinator, whether it's one person or two separate people, are not trained properly to extend these treatment plans, this activity is going to fail. So part of our analysis when we go into, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, too, but
you're fine.
I think that these are realistic numbers when you consider that you're only going back 12 months. I mean, if you looked at the entire history of all charts, then it wouldn't be realistic because people move, people pass on, as you said. And it's just like a receivable. The older it is, the less likely you're going to collect it. But I think these are probably conservative numbers when you're going back.
They're very conservative. And when we do the analysis, I like to go conservative because statistics show that any treatment or any appointments that are lacking anywhere between 6 to 12 months, the closer those appointments are, the closer those due dates and or presentation dates are, the easier it is to get those patients back in. The farther out they are, the more difficult it is. That's why we only go out 12 months. Yeah. In some practices, I'll go out 6 months.
The other thing that occurs to me is that I know it's early in your talk, but I mean, I know you and I know how you approach things. This isn't really a dependency relationship that you're developing with clients. In many cases, you identify some critical bottlenecks that are or weak links in the success chain, which when addressed can rather quickly bring the client to self-sufficiency. And frankly, you work yourself out of a job, right?
Well, you could look at it that way, but I look at it as more of an opportunity because you crack me up. That's actually pretty funny.
No,
I hope I don't.
No, I do the same thing. When I coach my clients, some things they continue to require ongoing service, like SEO or things that they can't possibly do them. So they could even hire someone and bring them in, but usually that's cost prohibitive. But eventually, they improve their skill, and then you bring them to more or less of a maintenance program. But maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit. But that's
you know what? No, absolutely, you're not jumping the gun at all. And it's when we go into practices, our focus is to regain their profitability, because what we see is practices that aren't profitable and losing money. The owner or owners, providers, meaning the dentists themselves, they are so stressed out, they're losing sleep, they're not being able to eat. And it's a huge stress on them because they're looking at their bank account and they're like, I have no money. What is going on here? I'm working my tail off. So we're going into the practice to try to regenerate these monies, regenerate patients, because it's not all about the money of the practice. It's about, my philosophy. And when I work with when I work with clients, what I want to make sure is our philosophies are pretty much the same, is if you abide by the client, meaning the patient, and if you do what's right by the patient, the profitability is going to come later. Meaning that if there's treatment, diagnose the proper treatment. Don't throw treatment in there that, that patient really doesn't need. And I've seen that, but the majority of dentists don't do that. But, back to what I was saying is that if we can relieve that dentist stress or the client stress, that actually makes us successful. And you're right. We work with clients so we can make them self-sufficient because we don't want to hold their hand throughout their entire career. And however, but we do put, if they're interested, we'll do maintenance when we come in maybe once or twice or 3 times a year, once a quarter, whatever it may be. But they should be self-sufficient. And these types of processes we put in place helps them to get to that point. And then they feel successful because now they don't have to rely on somebody to, coach them until they decide to retire.
Thanks for clarifying.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. So this is the untapped equity. If we were to get 50% of this back into the practice and review the treatment coordination process, the skill level and competencies of the individual. So we did put in a case coordinator. We actually took one of the team members, and part of our analysis is I interview each of the team members of the practice because I'd like to get an idea. First, I'd like them to get to know me, because anytime a consultant comes into a practice, the team's like, oh boy, here we go. They're going to fire us. And that's not what we do. We're going in to take a look at the team, how strong the team is individually and collectively. Are they sitting in the right seats of the bus? Are they on the right bus and not in the right seat, or do they need to get off the bus? And so we're always looking to build skill level of team members and give them the right tools, but it's their choice to take those tools and run with it for the success of the practice, or not to take those tools and pretty much work themselves out of a position. So we put the proper case coordinator, financial coordinator in place, and we also created 2 customized case management binders for follow-up. So yes and yes. So then we went to the 3rd operational module. Now for this practice, it really wasn't that bad, but there was still outstanding money. So the outstanding insurance is estimated all together at about 132. When I look at practices, I actually go from, in this category, I go from the bottom up. The first one I want to look at is at 90 plus, because those are the ones that can be out there for 3 years, 5 years, 6 months, a year, what have you. And those are the ones that are going to be harder to get back into the practice. So we hit that category first. And then I look at the 61 to 90 and the 3160. I really don't look at the current or analyze that too much because they're current. They're usually within 0 to 30 days. And what I'm seeing right now, the average turnaround time of electronic claims, if submitted properly, not rejected, and all documentation, is about 7 to 12 days, depending. Unless you're in Illinois with Delta Dental of Illinois, they're still working on paying their claims to the state of Illinois. So in this case, the untapped equity was $38,401, and that's actually the 31 to 60, 61 to 90, and 90 plus. Now, their 90 plus was pretty good. The goal is less than 10, and they were at 6. The other 2 categories, they were just shy. So this really wasn't, it's area that we have to regenerate that equity, but I've seen a lot worse in this category with other practices, depending on the size. So with this office, they didn't have an insurance and billing coordinator at all. So it was just that, on the fly, if a EOB came in with a check and all insurances were paid up, they'd send out a statement. So we restructured this entire category. We hired a very experienced full-time insurance and billing coordinator and cleaned this up within a month and got them on track. So this was never an issue again. So the 4th operational module is the accounts receivable. Now, this is a category that when we pull the report, we really don't trust the numbers at the end of the report. I'll tell you why. So I know this may look like, a whole bunch of a mess, but when we look at the aging report, we also look at the credit balance report, because the credit balances actually subtract from the overall total of the aging report, and it also subtracts from each of the categories, such as current, 31 to 60, 61 to 90, and so on. So the total AR balance, including the credit balances, was 103,000. The AR balance without the credit balances was 94. So it falsely reduces the total AR. So the amount in credit balances of 7,600. And then I calculate an average month's production, and in this case we did it for 10.5 months, because I want to find out what the AR to production ratio is, because the goal is that your accounts receivable should be less than 1 month's production. So the practice ratio of AR to production for this practice was less than a month at 69%. So they were doing well there. Their credit balances were only $7,600. And with this, looking at the amount of over 90, yeah, that was a little high. So their balance was $38,000, which is 37% of the total balance owing. So the goal is less than 10. So they were over that. So with this, when we look at the last slide, part of the insurance and billing coordinator's role was to clean up that accounts receivable. So while we customized the process for this person, they jumped on board and within 3 months got this back on track. So now, if you take a look at each of these categories, okay, we sort of summarize this where it gets to the point of, here's the recare module, the hygiene department production, the perio, and it's going to show the total leakage. So the first operational module was the hygiene department that we looked at. That total was $947,000. The operational module number 2, which was case management, was 50% reactivation, but the total leakage of the report was $492,000. The operational module number three, which was the outstanding insurances, was $38,000. And the operational module of number 4, which was the accounts receivable, with the balance and the credits, the total leakage was $102,000. So if we come to the total outstanding operational equity for this practice, it was close to $1.5 million. Now, when we look at a practice of this high of outstanding operational equity, we also put together a practice analysis report. And in that practice analysis report, we break it down. If we were to get 15% back of this, it'd be this: 20, 25, 30, 35. When we put that in a report, we don't guarantee that that's what the practice is going to get back. And I'll tell you why. It's because we will provide the coaching, the tools, the implementation, and the training to the team, and we will do course correction where needed. But it's up to the providers, the owners of the business, and the team to implement it properly. We're always in the trenches with the team members. But if they don't implement it properly, they're not going to be able to get those percentages back. But what I will say, since this business has been in motion, the teams have been pretty good at implementing. They're passionate about it. If they have questions, we're always, whether it's me or our team members, we're always in touch with our team, with the offices. They have our cell phone numbers, our email addresses, and we do that to build the business relationship with these practices. In the beginning, we get a little bit more phone calls than we want, but as time goes on, we don't, because they're becoming self-sufficient. So I'm wondering if you're wondering, well, what happened with this practice? How much did you get back in? So if we were just to get untapped equity of 50% of this, it'd be $790,000 plus to the bottom line. Well, in this practice, we regenerated 62% over a 2.5-year time frame. And actually, I apologize, it was close to 2 years, because the 6 months after that, we didn't measure it because they were in transition to be acquired. So that's a pretty good chunk of change for the practice. So if you divide that by 2, per year, that's pretty good. So that comes down to our Q&A.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And we do have
a
number of questions. And I want to also thank you for the 2 offers that you're extending here. The analysis services, which is a really hefty savings, and oops, there we are.
There we go.
As well as just making yourself available with no obligation to speak with people. And you want to just spend a minute or two sharing kind of how that goes and what the deliverables from that conversation will be?
Absolutely. So for anybody that's on the webinar, we're offering a complimentary consultation conversation for 30 minutes. And the way to do that is I have a Calendly link, which is basically a link in real time to my calendar that if you'd like to schedule 30 minutes with me, you just go onto the site, you pick a time, and it automatically hits my calendar and blocks out that time for you. It's a pretty cool piece of technology. Now, on the other side, on the left side, offer for webinar attendees, we have I wouldn't say product, it's more product service, where we will come in and analyze those 4 categories. It doesn't include the specialty, I'm sorry, not specialty, it doesn't include the referral base, but if it's part of the business, we take a look at that. But if you were interested in the 1 through 4, which is the evaluation of the hygiene department, evaluation of the case management, your outstanding insurances, and your accounts receivable, there'd be a savings of a little over $1,000 for that service. So, and that would be just for 1 location. If the people on the line, if it was an emerging DSO, then that would actually be a different scope of engagement proposal to put together. But if an emerging DSO just wanted to say, you know what, I have this one practice that just isn't working well, can you come in and analyze that? We would be happy to. It's just depending on what the client or the conversation and where it takes us. So that's pretty much what we're offering at this point.
Excellent. Sounds very, very value-packed. Okay, first question, which is, do you work with Open Dental?
Yes, we do. We do work with Open Dental. And with one of the things that I pride myself on, and I have to be ahead of the curve, is with the practice management software systems. So because I have to know how to go in and retrieve this data. Now, one of the things I can say about Open Dental is, with Open Dental, you have your main system, but then depending on any customized reporting that the practice has requested from Open Dental, I would just need to know how to work with those customized reports to get the data that I need. But yes, we've worked with EagleSoft, Dentrix, Open Dental. We've worked with Mogo long time ago. PracticeWorks, SoftDent, Denticon, which I think is Planet DDS. And we've also worked, there's another one out there, I think it's CareStream.
EagleSoft?
EagleSoft, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the presentation here was Dentrix. These were Dentrix reports. So if anybody's viewing and they're like, oh, yeah, those are Dentrix reports.
Okay, excellent. Next question, how does this type of comprehensive evaluation benefit practices? I guess that was an early asked question. You think demonstrated a lot of benefit, but would you care to elaborate on that?
Sure. The benefit is it depends on the goals of the owners / executives / providers, the business owners of the practice. If they're if they're in a situation where money's leaking out the back door and they're like, you know what, I'm having to go to the bank to take out a loan and make my payroll, we got a problem. So that would be a benefit, to come in and analyze, figure out where you're leaking, and start to quickly regenerate these monies. Now, one of the things, as a side note, what we have realized is that we can actually start the regeneration of this money where the client sees it within 1 to 3 months. Not all of it, but they see a pretty hefty hit to their net revenues and their bank accounts. So to go back to the question itself, so if somebody is just leaking money out the back door and they have to go to the bank for payroll, another is if they see that, you know what, we're kind of falling behind from previous years. We had productivity in 2017 that was this amount, and now we're decreasing. What's going on here? So that's another benefit, to come in and analyze and figure out, why the practice is declining. Whether it's an acquisition or acquisition into transition, which to me, that is a really important category, and I'll tell you why. What I'm seeing is, as we know, there's a lot of consolidation in our industry of practices. And The challenge that I'm seeing with offices when a buyer is looking to purchase the practice is that they're not doing their due diligence of comprehensively analyzing the operational components and modules of that business. And then when they purchase it and they start to work with the practice, then they start to see, well, wait a second, I'm not generating the profitability that I thought I was when I purchased this practice. And there could be several reasons why that is. It could be because maybe they don't provide the same services as the previous owner did, or they don't accept the same insurances that the previous owner did.
Sure.
So
or the goodwill left with the owner.
You got that right, or the accounts receivable, or whatever it may be. So to go in and have us analyze those modules and all operational modules, and just not the equity modules, to get an idea of what the seller is purchasing is imperative. And it will help them to make the proper decision to say, you know what, I can purchase this practice, there's opportunity, or you know what, I'm not going to be able to make this work. Other benefits is if the practice is looking to purchase another location and they want to pull equity out of this business to, help to purchase that other business instead of getting a loan. There's always equity in these dental practices. So those are the benefits. Again, it's not always about scaling. It's not always about, increasing dollars quickly. It really depends on the goals and the vision of the owners, executives, private equity, whatever they're looking to do.
Point taken. All right. Here's it's a question. I'll read it verbatim, and then I had a question too about one statistic that you cited, Diana. And it sounds like this questioner might have got it better, but the statement is best practice to achieve 90% of active patients into the ReCare program versus best practices to make sure hygiene production is 33% of office. First of all, is that, because I don't know if you misspoke or I misunderstood, but you said something about hygienists generating 33% of their salary, or that's what I heard, and I don't think that's what you meant to say, or what maybe you did say. Where did the 33% come in? And I'm hoping that you understand his question better than me.
Yep,
I think he's just saying.
Yeah, okay, so no, I do understand your question. So this is industry standard. This is not a number that I pulled out of the air. So with the overall productivity of the practice, the doctors should be producing, or the doctors should be producing 70% of the productivity of the production, while hygienists should be doing 30%. That's in a GP practice. If it's a specialty practice, it could be a little bit different because, like, for example, it's a perio practice, it's going to be different because, it's more, the doctor is usually 80 and hygiene is 20. So that's the one category. That's industry standards. That's overall productivity. If it's just the hygienists themselves, depending on what the hourly rate is of that hygienist. So for example, let's say the hygienist is, her hourly rate is $33 an hour. She should be producing $99 an hour per $99 per hour for the entire day.
Her salary
to
should
cover
be
her compensation.
a third. Yes, her salary should be a third of. Okay.
Correct.
That makes sense.
Correct.
Of her production. Yep. Okay, very good. I'm just taking notes too.
Absolutely.
What happens before, next question, what happens before, during, and after the operational equity comprehensive evaluation? This might go to the point I made earlier.
Sure. So the way that we structure the process of the evaluation, now the evaluation does not include implementation. So the structure of the evaluation, it comes in two parts. So the first part is obviously meeting with the client, getting an idea of what's working, what's not working, putting together a scope of engagement proposal of what our tasks are going to be, what the client's tasks are going to be, what the fees are going to be. We send that to the client. Once we agree on that, then we start the project. So we put dates in order. The first date is an analysis day. And, the analysis day is interviewing each of the team members or the key team members, generating reports while indirectly observing the operations of what's going on. Okay, that's the first day. And then debriefing the doctor at the end of the day, or the owner or owners sometime throughout the day. Then we come back in a week and we do an observation day. And the reason we come back, we actually do it within the week, is we want to make sure that the day we choose, that they pretty much tap out that schedule for the day. They schedule as many patients that they can that they're comfortable with, so we can see the activity of what's happening in this practice from the time they open to the time they close. After that, the next week is taking all of that data and putting it into a practice analysis report. And it's customized, it's free, written, it's not like a template by any means. It goes with the current reality, what the solution opportunity is, and then we put together the entire initial implementation action plan. Then we come back the fourth week and we present it to the owners and or the team, depending on, you know, the size of the business. Then from that point, once we agree on the initial implementation plan, then that's a different scope of engagement proposal with those fees. Send it to the decision makers, they make a decision, and then from that point, we start to schedule dates and get moving with our focus on implementation. Now, one of the things too is that we do not lock our clients into contracts, meaning that we're not going to come in and tell you, you know what, we feel we can get this done for you in 12 months. Well, if we feel we can get this done with you in 12 months, we're going to give you a fee schedule, and it's going to be paid monthly. So it's not like, okay, well, you're stuck in this for 12 months and you have to pay us. That's not the way it goes. I don't believe in contracts. I don't believe in long-term contracts. I believe of building strong business relationships and getting results. So that's how we structure the entire process. We've had clients on 5 months. I have a client right now that's on a 10-month, which we have 3 months left. I had a client that was on 3 months because it's a smaller practice. So it really just depends, but we never lock our clients to contracts.
Yeah, that's our approach, and I know it's your approach because we've known each other now for I don't still probably under 2 years, but we've done a lot of found a lot in common and a lot of contacts in common. But yeah, typically, you know, software as a service, that's becoming standard. So if any of you are stuck on long-term contracts with your vendors, those should be renegotiated for sure.
And there's something actually, Danny, there's something else I'd like to actually add into that.
Please.
Another area that really is not complementary, but is attractive to a client is that when I meet with them, I tell them that there's a couple reasons we're looking at this equity. First, we want to jumpstart your revenues, but also two, jumpstarting those revenues is also going to help pay for our services, so you don't have to go get a bank loan. So, and they're like, oh, really? And that's why, and that's another reason we do it month to month, because we want to regenerate those revenues so they feel comfortable where they're not putting out, you know, 50, 70, you know, $120,000, you know, getting a loan from the bank.
Yeah.
We don't, so, you know, that's another attractive possibility for the client to take on, you know, this type of engagement.
That's another, I mean, it's a good business practice, but you want to provide as little pressure, financial and otherwise, on a client, so that they don't have to worry about that and watch the meter, so that your service, the value of your service, becomes self-funding as soon as possible with a minimal amount of you know, financial stress. So that's good to hear too, and that's our approach as well. We try to minimize any setup fees and startup costs, with the confidence, frankly, that the value of our service will become self-evident quickly enough that people will want to stick around. And so when they win, we win.
Exactly.
Okay. When is I don't know, this might be related to that. When is the best time to request and or start an operational equity module analysis project?
Boy, that's a good question. So the best time is when, a couple things. The best time is when the owner or owners of the practice start to feel chaos. And it's chaos that they continue to feel. So it's not like one day chaos here, one day chaos here. But what I mean by chaos is there's internal chaos, whether it's team dynamics, whether it's lack of profitability, whether, you know, it's the deposits aren't making it to the bank account, that, you know, we have all these patients and we're schedule bound or we're facility bound, Or, you know, if a practice says, you know what, we've hit our potential hump and we can get over it, we just don't know how. So I think to best answer that question is, if there's issues, that's the main reason to get this started and get it started ASAP. But also too, you know, is the practice getting ready to transition in the next few years, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and they need to get that practice attractive for sale? That's another way to start it, because it does take time to get these processes and procedures in motion where they're actually self-sufficient and the office is working like a well-oiled machine. Or, you know, if they are, like I said, going to the bank to get their payroll, which is always an issue. So I think it's really dependent on the client or clients or organization themselves. But I think that any time is a great time to get started on something like this, because there's money laying on the table. And these offices, especially with the insurance claims, we're seeing right now that these insurance claims are not being processed properly. The EOBs are coming in. Yes, the checks are being entered into the system, they're being deposited in the bank, but the insurance companies aren't even paying the EOBs properly because there's so many of them. So they're just kicking them out as fast as they can, and they're not being paid properly, whether it's through a third-party consolidator, such as Connection Dental, Denimax, one of those where they have a ton of insurance companies under their umbrella, or if they're being paid properly through a direct channel, such as Cigna or Delta. And what we're seeing is the team members of these insurance that are, you know, processing these insurances, the insurance checks and the EOBs, they're not dissecting the wording that's on the EOB, which is extremely important. So there's money that's just walking out the back door. So to overall answer your question, when is the best time? Anytime.
Fair enough. Here's another question. Is hands-on implementation and coaching part of or in addition to the analysis and evaluation? In general, how does that work?
Okay, so if a package is purchased of 1 through 4, as we talked about, or 1 through 5, if there's referral-based management, then there is several hours of implementation added into that package. If the package is not purchased like that and it's just an overall one operational module, then we'll come in and analyze that and then figure out how many hours are needed on the implementation side to get that module back up and running properly. So we have an a la carte menu, and then we have an overall comprehensive menu. What we're finding is I did the statistics about 2 weeks ago, and we have 83% of our clients that are interested and or have purchased the entire package, and 17% have purchased just an a la carte. But it's not easier for us, but it's a better overall focus to have all 4 of those analyzed because they amalgamate into one another. So for example, I'm in a client right now that just wanted me to look at his hygiene department and his new patient, which I did. After we did our month and I did the presentation last week, now he wants me to look over the case management, which wasn't added into that. But if it was, I could have given him a better direction instead of doing it separately.
Okay.
So to answer your
Sounds
question,
like, yeah, I think it answers it pretty thoroughly, because I've gotten a number of questions that are related to the the question of price, which is just like patients call. And I think the analogy is good when somebody calls a dental office and says, how much is your dentistry? Or they ask on a specific procedure. My opinion is that, you have to employ the right communication skills so that people don't feel like you're stonewalling them or ignoring their question. But in many cases, as practitioners know, what a patient thinks they need isn't what they need, and there are different options. So I would say, in fairness to you and fairness to all the people on the call that are asking various pricing questions, I would say call Diana, and she can explain how the schedule works. I think she's already given an indication of just how flexible her approach is. One question that I would have is, given that, and I'd like you to clarify a little bit about you said that there are certain things that you don't feel comfortable training others to do, and so you do them yourself. It sounds like every client gets Diana Thompson, which leads me to a bandwidth question. Just how much are you available? How many hours are you able to devote, and how many clients are you able to accept over a
Wonderful. I'm really glad you asked that question. So the way that our company is structured, now, mind you, like I said, I used to work for Mercer, and when I started, I was with them for 5 years. When I started, they had 18 consultants. When I left, they had 325. I didn't want to have a big company like that. So the way that I chose to structure this company was to have our core group of people. And right now, our core group of people, I'm the founder and owner. I have a business development lady. I have 3 consultants. I have 1 hygiene consultant, and then I have 2 independent contractors. And depending on personality and scope of engagement and all of that, then I will appoint who I need to the proper project. Now, if it came to a situation where I needed an accountant or a real estate person or legal counsel or somebody that within the dental industry, I surrounded our company with trusted advisory partners throughout the country that we've worked with, we've tested the waters with, and that we do good work with. And if I need somebody, I know who I need to go to because we are a national company. We work with dental clients throughout the country, no matter what size they are, no matter what their, the fee-for-service, PPO, Medicaid. We work with all different types of practices. So I'm really glad you answered that question because it does sound, because I'm doing this presentation, that I'm the only one in the company. Well, I'm the face of the company and I do all the analysis, but we do have other team members that are part of our team. We all work out of our homes because we want quality of life. We do travel, and we have a pretty good, happy, structured team. And that's how our company is created. Now, as far as
like
how many clients we can,
I
know, that's probably why we get along so well. So, but as far as how many clients we can work with, sky's the limit. We go where the business is. So we don't tap out. And I know that if we get to a certain level of number of clients, then I know when to hire, who to hire. I always have people in our funnel, our employment funnel, or independent contractor funnel. So, I always try to keep ahead of the curve on that as well.
Of course. Excellent. Okay. Well, that's going to do it for us. I just want to thank you very much for, delivering, I knew you would, and also for the great offer for people to learn more about how to unlock their operational equity with no further obligation on their part. In a few days, you will receive an email with instructions on how to receive your hour and a half of CE credit. And I wanted to share that owing to a busy travel schedule, our next webcast will be on Thursday, September 13th, again at 6 p.m. Central Time. And I promise you it will be well worth the wait because my very special guest on September 13th will be 3-time Practice Perfection alumnus, Dr. Tom Neighbors, DDS FACD, the former Chief Dental Officer and founder of Oral DNA Labs. Tom will share an introduction to a 3-pronged program whose purpose is to provide dental practices with an out-of-the-box solution for mastery of, as we are fond of referring to them, the 4 C's of the oral systemic model. Those 4 C's being clinical components of oral systemics, collaboration protocols to grow your professional referral network, communication skills to convey the value of this enhanced model for patient health and satisfaction, and of course, and this is very much what Diana's wheelhouse is concerned with too, how to create and maintain cash flow to continue to spread the oral systemic message. Until then, this is Danny Bobrow, thanking you again, Diana, and thanking all of you for your continued commitment to practice perfection.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.